An Airbus A320 with 146 souls on board is on final approach into Bangalore, India. In the cockpit, everything seemed routine, except that it wasn't. How long will it take for the pilots to realize that they're too low for a safe approach? As the ground rushes up to meet them, would the very technology designed to protect them guide them past the point of no return? This is the story of Indian Airlines Flight 605. On February 14, 1990, as couples around the world celebrate Valentine's Day, ground crew prepare an Airbus A320 for departure. Flight 605 is scheduled to depart from Bombay and make a routine domestic trip to Bangalore. As the passengers board, two seasoned pilots are in the cockpit running through their pre-flight checklists. In the left seat sits Captain Fernandez, aged 46, a seasoned pilot with over 9,000 flight hours. But for this flight, he's not just flying, he's under evaluation. This is the first of 10 required route checks for him to qualify as an A320 captain. Fernandez had 68 hours on the A320, all as co-pilot. Beside him is Captain Gopujkar, age 44, the Czech pilot, an experienced instructor with over 10,000 flight hours tasked with assessing Fernandez. Gopujkar had 255 hours on the A320, of which 212 of those hours were as pilot in command. So, while both pilots were very experienced, their hours on this type of aircraft were relatively short, which is not at all surprising because the A320 was very new at this time. For context, 10,000 hours is considered highly experienced, often taking 15 to 20 years of professional flying to accumulate. On board were a total of 146 people, consisting of 139 passengers, 5 cabin crew, and the 2 pilots. At 11:58 a.m. local time, almost an hour behind schedule, Flight 605 departs from Bombay. They climb smoothly to a cruising altitude of flight level 330 or 33,000 feet. As they make their way towards Bangalore, passengers settle in for the short flight, completely unaware of what lies ahead. Let's take a quick moment to understand the aircraft they're flying in. The Airbus A320 represents a quantum leap in aviation technology and was very new in 1990. This aircraft introduced a fly-by-wire system, replacing traditional mechanical controls with electronic signals interpreted by computers. In conventional aircraft, pilots felt physical feedback through the controls, providing important situational awareness. The fly-by-wire system eliminated this tactile connection, requiring pilots to rely more on instrument readings and visual cues. So, while this new technology offered precise control and enhanced safety features, it fundamentally changed how pilots interacted with their aircraft. Both pilots of Flight 605 were still adapting to this new paradigm. For them, a critical question loomed: would this cutting-edge technology prove to be a lifesaver or a silent, deadly trap? One of the Airbus A320's critical safety features is the Alpha Floor Protection System. We'll talk about it more later, but for now, I want you to remember that it takes up to 8 seconds for the engines to spool up from idle to max power. That delay plays a significant role in the unfolding events of Flight 605. All was well. In the cockpit, the pilots settle into the routine of this short domestic flight. To add important context, we need to remember that this was a check flight, and it's possible that both captains were navigating the complex dynamics of such a flight. The evaluation process adds psychological pressure to an already demanding operation. While the exact impact on their thoughts and interactions is unknown, these subtle factors could influence the unfolding events. At 12:44 p.m., the crew is cleared to descend to 11,000 feet, The weather conditions at their destination seem ideal: light winds, excellent visibility, and a comfortable 27 degrees Celsius or 81 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet, beneath this calm exterior, unseen factors are at play. As Flight 605 continues its descent towards Bangalore, the workload in the cockpit intensifies. The pilots begin their approach briefing, initially planning for a VOR-DME approach to runway 09. This type of approach, using ground-based radio beacons, is familiar territory for both men. But later in the flight, air traffic control offers the crew radar vectors for a visual approach instead of the expected instrument approach. It's a common occurrence in aviation, often simplifying the landing process. Radar vectors involve controllers using radar to guide aircraft along specific paths. They provide pilots with headings to fly, effectively vectoring the aircraft to a desired position. This method is frequently used to sequence landings or guide planes to a point where pilots can visually see the runway. However, this change introduces a new variable into an already complex scenario. The pilots must now mentally shift gears on the fly. In the context of a check flight with its unique pressures, such an adjustment takes on added significance. This last-minute change, seemingly routine, would set in motion a chain of events that would push both men and machine to their limits. The pilots discuss the approach profile. They plan to cross 11 miles out at 6,000 feet and 7 miles out at 4,500 feet. Given that their destination airport is approximately 3,000 feet above sea level, they calculate a minimum descent altitude of 3,280 feet. It's a textbook approach plan, but executing it perfectly will require precise energy management. Minimum descent altitude is a calculated figure that represents the lowest altitude the aircraft can descend to while performing their non-precision approach without having visual confirmation of the runway. If the pilots can't see the runway upon reaching 3,280 feet, they must abort the landing attempt and climb away. At 12:53 p.m., Bangalore radar identifies Flight 605 at 42 nautical miles out. The controller provides vectors for the visual approach to runway 09. In response, the pilots adjust their altimeter setting to the local atmospheric pressure of 1,017 hectopascals. A quick cross-check confirms their current altitude at 8,500 feet. ATC cleared Flight 605 to 4,600 feet, and the crew promptly set this altitude into the Flight Control Unit. The Flight Control Unit, FCU, is the control panel where pilots input instructions to the autopilot system. It allows them to set and adjust flight parameters, such as altitude, speed, and heading during automated flight. At 1 p.m. local time, just before reaching 7 miles from the airport, with the autopilot still engaged, the crew activates the approach mode. This seemingly routine action sets off a cascade of events that will prove critical in the coming minutes. The approach mode automatically commands slower airspeeds when in managed speed mode. In Airbus aircraft, managed speed is a function where the flight management system automatically calculates and maintains the most appropriate speed for each phase of flight. During descent and approach, it considers factors like aircraft weight, configuration, and any programmed speed constraints. This differs from selected speed, where pilots manually input a specific speed they want to travel at. The pilots calculated a managed approach speed of 132 knots. As they continue their descent, they make various configuration changes, lowering flaps and extending landing gear. Beneath this veneer of routine, a silent danger is brewing. The flight directors, those guides on the primary flight display, remain active, and this will become important later on. Flight directors can be thought of like GPS navigation for planes. They show pilots the best path to fly using special markers on their screens. Pilots can follow these markers to stay on the path that the plane's computer has figured out. However, relying on flight directors during a visual approach can overcomplicate the landing and potentially distract pilots from maintaining their situational awareness. It's a bit like a car driver trying to follow both a phone's GPS and road signs at the same time. A bit too much information and quite distracting.
Runway in sight.
Fernandez calls out at 42 seconds past 1 p.m., about 7 miles from the airport. The autopilot is disconnected. It's a pivotal moment. The highly automated A320 is now under manual control for pitch and roll. Or is it? The next 30 to 40 seconds of the flight are crucial. As the aircraft descends through 5,000 feet, the auto-flight system prepares to capture and maintain the target altitude of 4,600 feet. However, other automated systems, including the flight directors and autothrust, remain active. Just 2 seconds later, Fernandez requests,
Okay, 700 feet, rate of descent.
The training captain responds,
Missed approach is.
but his voice is cut off by an ATC transmission. This brief exchange masks a critical misunderstanding. Fernandez had initially requested that the go-around altitude of 6,000 feet be set in the flight control unit, an important safety measure in the case of a potential missed approach. But the training captain doesn't acknowledge or execute this request. Instead, he offers vertical speed mode as an alternative, which Fernandez accepts. In the busy moments that follow, a critical misunderstanding occurs. The exact sequence of events becomes murky, but investigators later propose several scenarios. One possibility is that instead of setting a vertical speed of 700 feet per minute, the pilot not flying, the training captain, might have inadvertently selected a target altitude of 700 feet. Another theory suggests a rapid adjustment of the altitude knob, first up towards the missed approach altitude of 6,000 feet, then quickly back down. Whatever the case, the result is the same. The aircraft unexpectedly enters idle open descent mode. It's a small error, a twist of a knob, a moment's confusion, but one with potentially catastrophic consequences. In idle open descent mode, the engines are at idle thrust, and the aircraft essentially glides, rapidly bleeding off airspeed and altitude. It's a useful setting for rapid descents at higher altitudes, but near the ground, it's a recipe for disaster, trading precious energy for a steeper descent. Now that the engines are commanded to idle thrust, the auto-throttle system ceases to maintain the target approach speed of 132 knots. This critical airspeed, essential for a safe approach, is no longer being automatically managed by the aircraft. But the pilots will notice this, right? I mean, as pilot monitoring, the training captain should be closely monitoring the aircraft's instruments, ready to call out any deviations from the expected flight parameters. His role is crucial in maintaining situational awareness and catching any discrepancies that might develop. However, at this stage, there are no immediate call-outs about airspeed decay or unexpected descent rates. The radio altimeter calls out 400 feet. 4 seconds later, it calls out 300 feet. It's at this moment the training captain finally realizes the aircraft's state, saying,
You are descending on idle open descent all this time.
But at this point, it seems the pilots don't understand the gravity of their situation. Neither pilot takes immediate corrective action, demonstrating a worrying lack of situational awareness. Just after the 300 feet radio altimeter call-out, another crucial exchange takes place.
You want the flight directors off now? Yes. Okay, I already put it off. but you did not put off mine.
This brief conversation reveals a critical oversight. The captain under supervision had turned off his own flight director, but failed to verify that the training captain had done the same. Because one of the flight directors remained active, it prevented the auto-thrust system from reverting to speed mode and maintaining the ideal approach speed of 132 knots. Leaving any of the flight directors active for a visual approach is a deviation from Airbus's recommended procedures, and it's yet another factor that will play a crucial role as this story unfolds. The aircraft was losing speed and altitude too quickly. In the next few seconds, the true state of their predicament would become horrifyingly clear. We're now seeing the dark side of automation dependency. The crew, so accustomed to the A320's sophisticated systems managing the flight, seems to have lost touch with the basic feel of the aircraft. The absence of moving thrust controls, a feature of the A320, has removed a crucial tactile cue that might have alerted them to the dangerously low power setting. The confusion in the cockpit reaches a fever pitch with this next exchange between the pilots.
You're on the autopilot still? No, it's off.
The pilots still seem to be confused about which automatic systems are engaged. This would have been a great time to simply go around, but unfortunately, they missed that opportunity. As Flight 605 continues to decelerate, the crew seems oblivious to their critically low energy state. The ground is rushing up to meet them, but in the cockpit, there's an eerie calm with an absence of cockpit warning sounds. Then, at approximately 135 feet above ground level, the aircraft's alpha floor protection system activates. This last-ditch safety feature automatically commands an increase in thrust to maintain a safe angle of attack. It's the A320's final attempt to save itself and its occupants from disaster. Almost simultaneously, Fernandez finally recognizes the dire situation.
Hey, we are going down.
Fernandez immediately advanced the thrust controls to the toga takeoff go-round position. It's the correct action, but it comes far too late. The A320's engines, optimized for fuel efficiency, require about 8 critical seconds to spool up from idle to go-around thrust. These 8 seconds, which might as well be an eternity in their current situation, had already begun ticking away when the alpha floor protection system activated moments earlier. Flight 605 impacts the ground approximately 2,800 feet short of the runway at a speed of about 113 knots. The aircraft had come down on a golf course adjacent to the airport grounds. Both engines and the landing gear are ripped off from the fuselage as the A320 slides across the terrain, momentarily becoming airborne again until finally impacting a 12-foot embankment with devastating force just outside the airport boundary. Now, a new horror emerges. The aircraft bursts into flames, turning an already dire situation into a race against time for the survivors and first responders. Tragically, out of the 146 souls on board, 92 people lost their lives, including the 2 pilots and 2 cabin crew members. The investigation into Flight 605, led by the Indian Court of Inquiry, revealed that everything seemed normal until the final moments of flight. The cockpit voice recorder showed 2 experienced pilots working cordially together, following procedures and conducting routine checks. Yet in the span of just 35 seconds, this routine approach would transform into disaster. The investigation's probable cause highlighted failure of the pilots to realize the gravity of the situation and respond immediately towards proper action of moving the throttles, even after the radio altitude callouts of 400, 300, and 200 feet, in spite of knowing that the plane was in idle open descent mode. However, identification of the cause for the engagement of idle open descent mode on short final approach during the crucial period of the flight is not possible. While the investigation explicitly stated that the exact cause for how the aircraft ended up in idle open descent could not be proved, it does suggest a possible scenario. The training captain likely selected an altitude of 700 feet when intending to set a vertical speed. This speculative theory remains contested by the Indian Commercial Pilots Association, who point to possible A320 design flaws and note the flight data recorder's limitations in confirming such an error. The investigation revealed a critical 0.8 to 1.2 second delay between when the A320's safety systems trigger and activate. Tragically, it also identified 4 specific actions that could have prevented the accident. 1. Selecting 700 feet per minute vertical speed. 2. Switching off both flight directors. 3. Manually controlling thrust via toga. Or 4. Properly setting the go-around altitude of 6,000 feet. In response, Airbus implemented comprehensive changes to the A320 family, redesigning the flight control unit to make altitude and vertical speed knobs more distinct, enhancing flight deck displays and alerts for better energy state awareness, and improving automation mode indicators. Though we'll probably never know with absolute certainty exactly what happened, Flight 605's legacy lives on in these safety improvements, making aviation, already the safest mode of transport, even safer.